Imagine, just for a second, the sheer, chaotic energy of completely dismantling your entire government overnight. Literally, no rule book, no precedent, just a group of people drawing a line in the sand and saying, we will never, ever be ruled by a king again. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're plunging headfirst into the incredibly high-stakes, deeply dramatic birth of the Roman Republic back in 509 BC. We're going to be looking at two of its greatest and honestly, perhaps most terrifying founding figures, Lucius Junius Brutus and Publius Valerius Publicola.
And we are starting right here with this absolutely chilling verdict from the ancient Greek biographer Plutarch. He called it either divine or brutish. He's talking about a moment so extreme, so unbelievably uncompromising, that it basically hardwired the Roman mindset for centuries. I mean, he's talking about a leader who literally stood there and watched the execution of his own children, all just to protect this fragile, newly founded state. It's a really heavy thought, right?
So we really need to unpack this dilemma. What is the ultimate price of a republic? Because it's not just about how you build a new government, it's about what it actually costs you on a human level. When you're making that massive leap from a monarchy to a brand new system of self-governance, the structural and ethical prices are, well, they're unimaginably high. It really begs the question, exactly how far would you go to protect your freedom?
Section 1. The Fall of Kings.
To really grasp that cost, you have to look at how fast everything went down. Honestly, the sheer velocity of these events in 509 BC is staggering. The Roman monarchy didn't just slowly fade out, It collapsed in this violent, incredibly rapid sequence. It all kicks off with the tragic rape and suicide of a noblewoman named Lucretia by the king's son. And Brutus, who, get this, had literally been pretending to be a half-wit for years just to survive the king's paranoia, completely drops the act. He pulls the knife from her body and sparks a massive revolt that kicks King Tarquin the Proud right out of the city. Literally within weeks, the monarchy is dead and gone, and Rome elects its very first two consuls to share power. But as you might guess, peace was definitely not on the agenda.
Right out of the gate, Brutus leads the charge to establish an absolute ironclad oath. The Roman historian Livy tells us that the people swore that they would suffer no one to be king in Rome. This wasn't some casual political promise. This was a blood oath, a promise that would relentlessly bind Roman politics for the next 500 years, literally all the way down to the age of Augustus.
Section 2. The Bloody Cost of Liberty.
Okay, so getting rid of the king? That was only step one. The real test is what happens when the biggest threat to your shiny new republic comes from inside your own house. In the very first year of this new government, they uncover a terrifying royalist conspiracy. Basically, a group of young Roman nobles decided, hey, we actually kind of like the old monarchy better, and they plotted to sneak the exiled Tarquins back into Rome. Fortunately, a slave named Vindicius happened to overhear them talking. He immediately runs to our other main guy, Publicola, who doesn't hesitate. He raids the conspirators' house and grabs the incriminating letters. But here is the absolute gut punch of the story. The plotters? They included the two sons of Brutus himself.
So how in the world does Brutus handle this? The conspirators are dragged out into the forum. Brutus looks right at his own sons, Titus and Tiberius, and asks them 3 separate times to offer a defense. Silence. Absolutely no reply. Brutus then turns to the lictors, those are the state guards, and just says, "What remains is your duty." The guards strip his sons, scourge them, and behead them right there with axes. And through this entirely gruesome, heartbreaking scene, the sources say Brutus didn't even flinch. He didn't look away. He didn't let a single drop of pity soften his face. This right here is exactly the moment Plutarch called either divine or brutish. Brutus literally prioritized the survival of the state over his own flesh and blood. And in doing so, he set a truly terrifying standard for what Roman duty really meant.
Brutus wasn't acting in a vacuum, and this moment really built the true foundation of Roman law. His co-consul at the time, a guy named Collatinus, was a bit softer-hearted. He actually hesitated. He wanted to release the witness and go easy on the other noble conspirators. But Publicola stepped right in. He publicly opposed Collatinus and demanded that the executions had to proceed. Think about that. The brand new republic almost died of mercy right there in year 1. It was Publicola who crushed that leniency and made sure the republic actually survived.
Section 3. The Architect's Loss.
So with that immediate threat handled, Brutus actually dies in combat shortly after, fighting Tarquin's son. And that leaves Publicola basically all alone to be the architect of the new government. And the legal system he builds, it's deliberately asymmetrical, and it is pure genius. For your everyday ordinary citizens, he set up the right of appeal. That meant a consul couldn't just execute a Roman citizen anymore on a whim. That citizen could appeal their case directly to the assembly of the people. But on the flip side, for anyone even attempting to seize sovereign power, the penalty was death on the spot. No trial, no appeal, nothing. He built these incredibly fierce protections for the average person, but violently, ruthlessly rejected any would-be tyrants.
And he didn't just stop at laws. He built these brilliant architectural metaphors into the very structure of the state. For example, whenever Publicola appeared before the people's assembly, he made his guards physically lower their fasces. Those were the bundles of rods and axes they carried as symbols of power. It was this visible daily reminder that the consul answered to the people, not the other way around. Plus, he created an entirely new office called the quaestorship just to manage public funds. Why? Well, to structurally separate the treasury from the consulship. He made it incredibly difficult for a consul to just use the state's money to buy themselves permanent power. Just brilliant forward thinking.
Section 4. The House on the Hill.
But of course, even with all these amazing pro-democracy laws, Publiculus soon ran into a massive PR crisis. He had this ancestral, super grand mansion situated up on the Velia, which was this elevated hill that looked directly down on the forum where all the public business was conducted. Now remember, this is a highly paranoid public that literally just fought a war to expel a king. So, to the average Roman, seeing their super powerful consul coming down every day from a hilltop mansion surrounded by guards, well, it made him look suspiciously like a brand new king. The optics were just terrible. How he handles this is an absolute masterclass in political optics. He doesn't go out and argue with the people. He doesn't give a speech telling them they're being crazy or irrational. Instead, the second he hears about their jealousy, he quietly hires a huge crew of workers in the dead of night. And by the time the sun comes up the next morning, he has completely leveled his own beautiful ancestral home, reduced it entirely to dirt.
The people were just in awe. I mean, their council chose to be completely homeless, literally having to go and beg lodgings from his friends rather than risk losing the trust of the public. This incredible overnight sacrifice is exactly what earned Publius Valerius the famous name that we know him by today, Publicola. It literally translates to friend of the people. It's just this incredibly stark reminder of the huge difference between merely holding on to power and actually keeping it.
Section 5. Brutus versus Publicola.
Which brings us to this really fascinating historical contrast. When we look back, how do we actually remember the men who forged this republic? Well, it depends on who you read. If you're reading the Roman historian Livy, Brutus is absolutely the main character. Livy focuses on the passion, that bloody foundation, those unbreakable oaths, and the raw, brutal sacrifice. But if you flip over to the Greek biographer Plutarch, the protagonist totally shifts to Publicola. Plutarch loves the enduring legal scaffolding, the carefully designed institutions, and the guy who actually stuck around to manage the incredibly messy reality of day-to-day governance.
And man, manage it he did. Publicola went on to serve in incredibly unusual 4 consulships during those super turbulent early years. He fought off wars, he negotiated complicated treaties, and when he finally passed away while still in office in 503 BC, Rome threw him a massive public funeral. And why was it paid for by the public treasury? Because Publicola had died totally broke. He had spent literally his entire personal fortune just serving the state. Which leaves us with this final kind of provocative thought. Plutarch actually loved to compare Publicola with Solon. Now, Solon was the famous Greek lawmaker who wrote all of Athens' laws, but then he immediately left town so they could run on their own without his influence. Publicola, on the other hand, stayed right there in Rome. He tore down his own house, ground his way through 4 grueling consulships, and basically forced the new republic to survive its chaotic infancy through sheer will. So, I'll leave you with this question. Is it more virtuous to be the visionary spark who builds the new rules and then steps aside, or the architect who stays behind, getting their hands dirty to manage the messy everyday reality? It's something to think about the next time you see a government change hands. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history behind the headlines.